Mike Wolfe, once a beloved figure on television, admired for his passion for history and his charming presence on American Pickers, is now at the center of a legal storm that has shocked his fans and rocked the world of antiques and reality TV to its core. The courtroom scene that unfolded this week was nothing short of dramatic, leaving fans reeling and the community of collectors and TV personalities changed forever. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension as people poured in. Reporters, curious onlookers, loyal fans, and seasoned legal observers all found their seats and held their breath while the judge prepared to deliver the final sentence in what had become a high-profile case. Mike Wolfe, who had been under federal investigation for several months, stood stoically in front of the court, his expression unreadable. The allegations against him were serious. Prosecutors accused him of wire fraud, tax evasion, and knowingly dealing in stolen artifacts. For many, these claims felt like a betrayal. They seemed so far removed from the warm, bike-riding treasure hunter viewers had welcomed into their homes for over a decade. On television, Wolfe had portrayed himself as a man who respected history, cherished American stories, and brought a touch of nostalgia to viewers nationwide. But behind that smile, prosecutors argued, was a calculated scheme involving unlawful dealings and deceptive business practices that put him at the center of a federal investigation. As the judge opened the sentencing statement, the room fell eerily quiet. The tension was palpable, as if everyone present sensed that something historic was about to take place. Then the words rang out. Mike Wolfe was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. The room gasped audibly. Reporters scrambled to take notes. Fans clutched each other in disbelief. Moments later, the scene turned even more surreal. Wolfe, standing before the bench, reportedly staggered backward, clutched the table in front of him, and collapsed to the courtroom floor. Chaos broke out as medics rushed in from the hall. Court officers shouted for order, and Wolfe lay motionless, his face pale, his breathing shallow. Court proceedings were temporarily halted. Emergency responders carefully examined him and, after stabilizing his condition, placed him on a stretcher. He was escorted out of the courtroom, still unconscious, as his legal team followed closely behind. Officials later confirmed what many had suspected. Mike Wolfe had suffered a stress-induced fainting episode, likely triggered by the emotional weight of the moment and the severity of the sentence handed down. The shocking collapse was captured not on video. Cameras are not allowed in federal court, but through hauntingly detailed sketches by courtroom artists. News outlets across the country rushed to share the images and details, and by nightfall, the story had spread like wildfire. To many, that fainting spell symbolized something much deeper than physical distress. It was the visual embodiment of the fall of a man who had once seemed untouchable, a cultural icon now facing years behind bars. Wolfe had built his reputation over decades, painstakingly cultivating a brand that stood for preservation, education, and the thrill of the hunt. He was not just a television personality. He was an advocate for history. His chemistry with co-host Frank Fritz, before their very public falling out, had endeared him to millions. Their banter, their long drives through the backroads of America, and their discoveries inside forgotten barns had made history accessible and fun. Wolfe's folksy charm and folky charisma were the cornerstones of his appeal. But according to prosecutors, there was another side to Mike Wolfe, one hidden behind the scenes, where the rules were bent and ethics were overlooked in the pursuit of profit and prestige. Behind the warm smile and easygoing demeanor, authorities alleged, was a businessman willing to cut corners. Federal agents, after months of investigation, revealed that Wolfe had been involved in shady deals, violating federal regulations on the acquisition and sale of antiquities. Court documents painted a grim picture. He had allegedly worked with offshore brokers to move rare items out of the country illegally, circumventing customs laws and international heritage protections. Worse still, he was accused of failing to report large sums of income from these deals, effectively hiding money from the IRS and defrauding the government. The prosecution brought out evidence that was, to say the least, damning. Emails, wire transfers, and witness testimonies suggested a deliberate pattern of fraud and deception. In some cases, Wolfe allegedly misrepresented the origins of high-value items, claiming they were from legitimate sources when, in fact, they had been looted from private collections or black market dealers. These weren't just technical violations. These were serious federal crimes that raised questions about his entire career and the legitimacy of his on-screen discoveries. Wolfe's defense team, however, pushed back hard. They argued that the charges were exaggerated, sensationalized by media coverage, and politically motivated. They painted a different picture, a man so immersed in the world of history and collectibles that he became entangled in the gray areas of a complex, international business. Mike Wolfe never intended to break the law, his lead attorney stated passionately during closing arguments. He got caught up in the complexities of a business he truly loved. This is not a hardened criminal. This is a man who loves history. They pointed to his philanthropic work, his support for museums and preservation initiatives, and his lack of prior criminal history. But despite their efforts, the court remained unmoved. The judge, in her sentencing statement, emphasized that passion and good intentions do not place one above the law. The sentence, she explained, was designed not just as a punishment for Wolfe but as a message to others in the industry. No matter how famous, how influential, or how loved, no one is exempt from accountability. Her words resonated with those in the courtroom, many of whom had come hoping for leniency but left with a stark reminder of justice's impartial hand. As Mike Wolfe recovers from his collapse, his legal team is expected to file an appeal. But legal experts who have reviewed the case say that overturning the sentence will be an uphill battle. The evidence is strong, the charges are serious, and the sentencing guidelines were followed to the letter. The appeals court, they warn, is unlikely to find cause for reversal unless a major procedural error is uncovered, something that, at this stage, appears unlikely. For the fans who had followed Mike Wolfe's career from the beginning, the shock remains. Social media platforms were flooded with messages of disbelief, sadness, and even anger. Some stood by their fallen hero, insisting the sentence was too harsh and that his contributions to historical preservation should have been considered more heavily. Others, however, expressed disillusionment, feeling betrayed by someone they had admired and trusted for years. It's like finding out Indiana Jones was smuggling relics for profit, one commenter wrote on a popular forum. The betrayal ran deep, because Wolfe wasn't just a TV host, he represented a shared passion for history, discovery, and the magic of the American past. Now, as he awaits his fate behind bars and his lawyers prepare for the grueling process of appeals, Mike Wolfe's journey from American picker to convicted felon serves as a cautionary tale. It is a powerful narrative about how fame, ambition, and blurred ethics can lead even the most admired figures down a path of destruction. The man who once drove from state to state, chasing forgotten treasures and telling stories of Americana, is now confined, not by geography, but by the cold bars of a prison cell. The implications ripple far beyond Wolfe himself. The antique television genre, once seen as innocent entertainment, is now under harsh spotlight. Other shows are being re-evaluated. Networks are reviewing contracts and compliance policies. The trust between fans and the personalities they love has been fractured. What was once a celebration of America's past has become a deeply modern scandal, filled with courtroom drama, legal intrigue, and moral questions about celebrity culture. And so, the world waits. Will Wolfe's appeal succeed? Will he be released on some technicality, or will he serve the full 14 years? Will his legacy ever recover from this scandal? These are the questions that now surround his name. But for now, one truth remains painfully clear. The fall of Mike Wolfe has turned the world of antique television upside down. Mike Wolfe, once a beloved figure on television, known for his engaging presence and passion for history, found himself at the center of a courtroom drama that shocked the nation. The courtroom scene that unfolded this week has left fans reeling and the world of antiques and reality TV changed forever. For years, viewers had tuned in religiously to watch Mike ride through the countryside, popping into old barns and forgotten shops in search of hidden gems. His knack for connecting with people and sharing the stories behind forgotten relics made him not just a host, but a cultural staple. However, the courtroom was packed this time not for celebration or discovery, but with reporters, fans, and legal observers as the judge prepared to deliver the sentence that would ultimately dismantle the image Mike had so carefully crafted over the years. Mike Wolfe, who had been under investigation for several months due to alleged financial crimes and unlawful dealings involving antique acquisitions, stood stoically as the charges were read. He appeared pale but composed, wearing a dark suit that seemed to hang heavily on his frame, perhaps a reflection of the gravity of the moment. Prosecutors had accused Wolfe of wire fraud, tax evasion, and knowingly dealing in stolen artifacts, claims that seemed far removed from the warm, bike-riding treasure hunter viewers came to love on American pickers. These weren't small charges or misunderstandings, they were allegations of a sophisticated and deliberate scheme to profit by bending, and in some cases breaking, the law. As the judge began to speak, the room fell into a tense silence. Every breath, every shuffle of paper, every murmur felt amplified. When the judge announced a sentence of 14 years in federal prison, the room gasped collectively. Some in the audience let out audible cries, others looked around in disbelief. It wasn't just the length of the sentence, but what it represented, A definitive fall from grace. And then, just moments later, Wolfe reportedly staggered, clutched the table in front of him as though trying to hold on to something tangible, and collapsed to the courtroom floor. Gasps turned into chaos as medics rushed in and court proceedings were temporarily halted. Some spectators covered their mouths in horror, others fumbled with phones to contact loved ones or capture updates. Wolfe lay still on the ground, his chest heaving slightly, a man crushed under the weight of his new reality. As the medics examined him and eventually escorted him out on a stretcher, a wave of surrealism swept through the courtroom. Officials later confirmed he had suffered a stress-induced fainting episode, likely triggered by the severity of the sentence and the emotional weight of the moment. The collapse was not merely dramatic, it was symbolic. It served as a shocking visual moment captured by courtroom sketch artists and reported immediately by media outlets around the country. To many, it symbolized the fall of a man who had become a cultural icon. Mike Wolfe wasn't just fainting from stress, he was collapsing under the crumbling facade of a life built in the public eye, now cracked by secrets and scandals. Mike had built his reputation on preserving history and connecting with everyday Americans who owned pieces of the past. He wasn't just a showman, he was a storyteller, someone who gave voice to objects and the people behind them. His chemistry with co-host Frank Fritz, before their well-documented falling out, and his folksy charisma made him a household name. Viewers admired his knowledge, his enthusiasm, and the sense of wonder he brought to forgotten items. But behind the scenes, authorities alleged Wolfe was cutting corners and violating federal regulations on antiquities. The charming man on TV who talked about the value of preservation was, according to prosecutors, orchestrating a series of illegal deals that betrayed the very principles he claimed to champion. According to court documents, Wolfe had allegedly worked with offshore brokers to move rare items out of the country illegally. These weren't just minor artifacts, they were high-value historical pieces, and their unregulated sale could have serious ramifications for cultural preservation. Prosecutors claimed Wolfe failed to report income on multiple deals and misrepresented the origins of some high-value pieces, actions that not only defrauded the government but also the buyers and sellers he worked with. The evidence, they said, showed a deliberate pattern of fraud and deception, a web of lies spun over years, protected by fame and trusted by fans. Wolfe's defense team, naturally, fought back. They argued that the charges were exaggerated and politically motivated, perhaps influenced by Wolfe's high profile and the public scrutiny that comes with it. They cited his philanthropic efforts, his contributions to historical preservation, and his lack of prior criminal history. Mike Wolfe never intended to break the law, his attorney said during closing arguments. He got caught up in the complexities of a business he truly loved. This is not a hardened criminal. This is a man who loves history. They painted a picture of a man who was perhaps too passionate, too driven, and ultimately overwhelmed by the very industry he helped popularize. Despite their impassioned pleas, the court was unmoved. The evidence was damning, the allegations serious, and the consequences necessary. The sentence sent a strong message, that even the most admired figures in pop culture are not above the law. It was a message that echoed beyond the courtroom, shaking the entertainment industry and the tight-knit community of antique collectors. For many, the ruling marked not just the end of Mike Wolfe's career but also a loss of innocence for a genre of television once considered wholesome and informative. As Wolfe recovers from his collapse and begins the process of adjusting to his new reality, his legal team is expected to file an appeal. They remain hopeful, determined to reduce the sentence or even reverse the conviction. But legal experts say overturning the sentence will be difficult. Appeals courts typically require clear procedural errors or new evidence to revisit a ruling, and in Wolfe's case, the trial had been thorough, the evidence compelling, and the judgment well documented. For fans, the shock remains. Many are still processing the news, trying to reconcile the image of the smiling, enthusiastic picker with the man accused of such serious crimes. Social media platforms are flooded with reactions, some expressing disbelief, others anger, and still others offering support. "I grew up watching Mike," one user wrote. "It's hard to believe he'd do something like this. I just feel sad." Others were more critical, questioning how long Wolfe had been engaging in these alleged activities and whether others on the show had known. The scandal has cast a long shadow over American pickers and raised uncomfortable questions about authenticity, trust, and the responsibilities of public figures. Mike Wolfe's journey from American picker to convicted felon is a cautionary tale. It's a story about ambition, ethics, and the slippery slope that can follow when passion turns into profit at all costs. He went from being a symbol of American nostalgia to a headline in a legal drama that has turned the world of antique television upside down. And while his name will forever be linked with the preservation of history, it will also now be associated with deception, betrayal, and a courtroom collapse that marked the end of an era. But what happens next remains to be seen. Will Wolfe find redemption? Will he use his platform to speak out about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of ethical business practices? Or will he disappear into obscurity, remembered only through reruns and courtroom transcripts? Only time will tell. In the meantime, his story serves as a powerful reminder that even those who appear to be guardians of the past must themselves be held accountable in the present. No amount of fame, charisma, or nostalgia can shield someone from the truth, especially when that truth comes crashing down in a courtroom packed with people who once admired you.